Yes, Jacob imprinted on a baby. And yes, we will be talking about it. Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to my first ever trope talk. I've always been a big fan of trope breakdown videos, getting into the variants of different fictional tropes in media, and for this one I have gone full video essayist, making a script and everything, and for my first trope talk I've decided to do one of my favorites, true mates. True mates as a trope can be difficult to nail down, but it basically posits the question, what if soulmates weren't only real, they were a biological imperative? True mates as a trope is most often used in speculative romance subgenres such as paranormal, sci-fi, and fantasy. It involves at least one non-human partner in the relationship, we'll call them the speculative partner, from a species whose biology or cultural mechanics involves the ability to recognize their soulmate. However, the mate bond is often not solidified until a specific action has occurred. This usually involves sex or a bite, but can sometimes be a full ritual involving actual magic. The mechanics of the mate bond differ from story to story. Sometimes there are benefits, like a telepathic bond that lets the pair communicate without speaking and know where the other is at all times. In other cases, there are negative aspects, like if one of the pair dies, the other will follow shortly after, or they are unable to remain physically apart for long periods of time. However, it's not these mechanics that I'm going to use for the variants of this trope. Instead, we're going to focus on what makes this trope unique in romance, the plot. In most romance stories, the realization that the relationship is solid and forever is usually the culmination of the story. But in True Mates, that realization is the inciting incident. So for the trope variants, I'll be focusing on who knows their true mates, when they know it, and how. I'll also be talking about the trope's biggest advantages as well as its pitfalls and how to avoid them. Quick disclaimer here. We will be discussing topics such as sex, reproduction, and relationship abuse. If you're not in a place to handle those topics, feel free to click off the video, no hard feelings. And while I have read every book I am discussing here, I am not going to go in depth on my opinions of them. Some of them I liked, some of them I disliked. We're just not going to get into that right now. Variant 1, Oblivious Human. This is arguably the most common version of the trope and is often used as the first book of a series. In the Oblivious Human variant, the speculative partner will see another person and automatically recognize them as their true mate. However, the person they've recognized is usually a human that doesn't even know their species exists, let alone that they're true mates. Occasionally, the unaware partner is also speculative, but from a species that doesn't have true mates. The conflict here is similar to most paranormal or fantasy romances. The aware partner has to convince the unaware partner to love them before they can reveal the truth about their existence. The underlying tension revolves around the fear that their unaware partner will not accept them once they know. In the case when the unaware partner is also from a speculative race that knows the existence of other species, the tension revolves around whether they'll accept a true mate bond. In Stalked by the Kraken by Lillian Lark, the witch protagonist has worked with all manner of speculative races and isn't fazed by them. However, she's had a previous relationship go sour that shook her entire belief in romance as a whole. Therefore, the Kraken man can't simply announce to her that they're forever, as she'd reject him outright. The tension revolves around whether she can let go of the hurt from the previous relationship and move on with her true mate. Alternatively, you can have the unaware partner be informed directly and refuse to believe it. In Snowed In with the Alien Warlord, the human protagonists assume that all the talk of mating is just an injured alien's fever dream. Therefore, the tension lies in whether or not said alien can prove its existence to her and convince her to claim him in return. This variant also has a notable subtrope to it, what I am calling the extreme biological clock. In this subtrope, it's imperative that the speculative partner finds their true mate before a biological deadline or something horrible will happen. In A Mate for the Christmas Dragon by Zoe Chant, all members of the Dragon Shifter family must find their true mate and complete the bond by their 25th birthday. Failure to do so results in the shifter being stuck in one form, either human or dragon, and never being able to shift to the other again. In Ruin by Kate Rudolph, the speculative partner is a member of an alien race that must find and complete the bond with their mates before their 30th birthday or they die. This subtrope creates an extra level of tension. Literal lives could be on the line. It also creates an extra level of secrecy. The threat could either push the unaware partner away or force them to mate out of pity and ruin the bonding process. So the aware partner needs their true mate to fall in love with them without the knowledge of the deadline. As the aware partner in this dynamic also tends to be a male, this subtrope turns a common gender stereotype on its head. Now it's the man worrying about his biological clock. Variant 2, animal instincts. This is the most common in shifter romances specifically. Shifter mythos can differ from author to author, but there's often a trope wherein the animal inside the shifter has their own form of intelligence distinct from the human side. It could be a fancier way of describing the psychological phenomenon of the id, ego, and superego, or it could be two wholly separate beings somehow occupying the same physical space. Either way, they're not of the same mind, and that causes conflict. In the animal instincts variant of true mates, it's the inner animal that recognizes their true mate. The conflict is them convincing the more human side to get on board. In some cases, the human can be outwardly fighting against their animal side because their human side finds something distasteful about their prospective partner, or else they might have reasons to not want a relationship at all. In cases where the delineation between animal and shifter is less distinct, there can be an element of misunderstanding that needs to be solved. The human part of the brain knows their animal is fixated on this person they've just met, but the animal does not communicate with them in direct words, so they don't understand why. This also allows for the fun light bulb realization when the shifter finally realizes why their inner animal has been going gaga. Variant 3, insta-love, but also there's danger. I have called this insta-love, but also there's danger because I am not good at naming things. In this variant, both partners recognize the other as their mate immediately. In these instances, the conflict of the story usually comes from an outside source that threatens their happiness together. Most often, this involves an antagonist that is already targeting one of the partners. This threat then extends to the true mate once their relationship becomes known. There's also a subtrope wherein the characters are prevented from wanting to complete the bond due to some prophecy that looms over them. In A Very Berry Christmas Cruise by Ellie Pond, the couple are both aware that they are true mates. However, the female protagonist has been informed of a prophecy wherein she will have to make the ultimate sacrifice for her coven of witches. In the world of this book, shifters cannot survive the death of their true mate, so she cannot complete the bond without putting him in literal danger. And yes, there's more than one shifter romances that features both Christmas and an imminent threat of doom. In Wildfire Sea Dragon by Zoe Chant, both shifters recognize each other as their true mate. However, the male protagonist has seen a vision wherein his mate will die by an external threat, so he pushes her away to prevent this from happening. Now, regardless of what literary snobs like to write in their articles, a happily ever after is a requirement for capital R romance. So for this variant, all external threats will be defeated by the end of the book or the series. The prophecy will usually be vague enough that there's a loophole, or one of the characters will complete an arc that unlocks the way to avoid it, and they go off into their sunset. Variant 4. No one knows. This is one of the lesser known variants of the trope, wherein the couple or polycule is informed by a source outside of themselves that they are destined to be together. This can differ depending on the genre. In fantasy, it may be revealed through some kind of magical matchmaker or seer. In sci-fi, it's revealed through a piece of technology that can tell true mate compatibility through genetics or DNA. And this variant often features prophecies as a source of conflict as well. Only in this case, it usually revolves around the couple coming together as part of the journey to face some specific danger. In I Married a Lizard Man by Regine Abel, both a psychic matchmaker and a seeress tell the main couple that they're the perfect match and meant to be, and that their pairing is meant to save the titular lizard man's primitive alien culture from evil human capitalism. For sci-fi, the conflict lies in how faulty technology can be. The device created in Alien Prince Charming by Zara Xenia is made to find said alien prince's perfect match. However, the device can break or be tampered with by antagonists. There's usually a theme in these stories about how you don't need DNA to tell if people should be in a relationship, but the device will inevitably show that yes, they are genetically meant to be. Variant 5, Epic Reunion. In this variant, the catalyst for the story isn't the true mates meeting for the first time, but finally coming together after years apart. In some cases, the speculative partner will have already been aware that their true mates exist, but stays away for reasons. We'll get to that later. In other cases, it's an extension of the animal instincts variant, where a shifter ignored what their animal was saying to them and left their true mate unknowingly. If you're the kind of author or reader that wants both true mates and the surprise baby trope in your book, you can have your characters meet and have sex while the speculative partner is under the influence of mind-altering substances. In Wildfire Pegasus by Zoe Chant, the shifter protagonist conceives a child with his true mate and leaves because he was so whacked out on cold medicine he never realized who she was. Seriously, I adore that series, but that plot point was a stretch. The biggest theme for this variant is the strength and endurance of love. It doesn't matter how many years have passed or what caused them to drift apart, true mates will inevitably come back together and live happily ever after. Now that we have an overview of some of the variants of this trope, let's jump into the benefits of true mates over regular romance. 1. No need for forced proximity. In a true mate story, the characters don't need to be forced together for long periods of time to develop feelings. At least one of them, or a part of one of them, will be aware that the relationship exists and can take conscious steps to develop it. For example, in Wildfire Griffin by Zoe Chant, can you tell how much I love the series yet? The couple wouldn't have had reason to spend a long period of time in each other's company. It's when the shifter realizes who the human woman is to him that he takes the steps to stay around her for longer periods of time instead of leaving. In essence, the characters force the proximity themselves. Number 2, it ups the stakes more quickly. Usually, participants in the main relationship aren't the only ones in the book's world that knows about the concepts of true mates. Since everyone knows it's a given that the relationship will be forever, antagonists will usually skip over the paltry scheme of simply trying to break them up and jump right into the more dangerous stuff. And true mates in danger will skip the I think I like them stage and go right to the oh god, the love of my life is in danger stage. You can get to the drama and angst faster. 3. It comes with some fun mechanics. Like mentioned before, the speculative nature of true mates means you can have more fun building in mechanics into the relationship that couldn't exist otherwise. They can sense each other, know when the other is in danger, communicate telepathically, be physically unable to be away from each other, and so on. It offers both new solutions and new sources of conflict. Just make sure you keep track of the mechanics you've built in to prevent possible plot holes or continuity errors. The pitfalls. This trope isn't all benefits. Written poorly, it can create some unsavory aspects the author didn't intend. Number 1, insta-love. While the characters may be able to recognize that they're true mates right away, the reader usually still needs a build-up. This is usually done by making the characters figure out exactly how they work together, facing down an external threat together, or having a personal character arc that needs to be completed before the bond can be solidified. There still needs to be something getting in the way of their happiness at first to make the HEA feel earned. Number 2, it is a giant promise to live up to. True mates are not just good, healthy relationships. They are the pinnacle of relationships, a literal soul bond that everyone in the community respects. Your forever and always partner. If written poorly, it makes the character look like they've been trapped by their own genetics, forced by biology to be with a person that's not good for them. In the world of Ruby Dixon's Ice Planet Barbarians, the author reveals through side characters that a resonance mating can be dysfunctional, loveless, or even abusive. Therefore, resonance as a mechanic is purely a breeding instinct created by parasites, and any love that comes out of it is pure luck. This is also why I don't consider IPB to be part of the standard true mates trope. And number 3, it is highly heteronormative. True mates tend to adhere to a cis-het gender role-specific mindset. They are usually between a man and a woman, and if only one character is a shifter, it's most often the man. If they're both speculative characters, the man is usually from a stronger race. It usually focuses on a desire to breed and procreate, and it is often between a monogamous pair. While a lot of capital R romance adheres to this mindset, true mates can take it to the extreme and make heteronormativity a literal genetic requirement. In a bit, we will go into how to broaden stories beyond this very limited mindset to allow for the existence of people outside of this framework. And 4, grooming analogy. When an adult speculative character recognizes a minor as their true mate and then acts on it, you have created an analogy for the type of sexual abuse known as grooming. In Breaking Dawn by Stephanie Meyer, multiple werewolf characters imprint on infants and toddlers not even old enough to be in school. The book attempts to explain this away by stating that they do not act sexually or romantically towards said infant or toddler until they're older. However, this is ignoring the fact that most groomers do not act sexually towards their victims either. The grooming is them preparing their victims for a relationship by making it seem inevitable after several years. Editing Margaret with a quick point of clarification here. Yes, in some instances, the grooming will involve some kind of sexual encounter. But for the most part, the point of this kind of sexual abuse is to start low key and turn up the heat while the victim doesn't realize what's happening. So again, no, having your imprinted character not act sexually until later does not negate any kind of grooming analogy. It still follows the formula pretty closely. It doesn't matter how much you talk around it, Miss Meyer, you still had a grown man looking at a newborn and knowing he was going to have sex with her one day. We will also go over how to avoid this pitfall. Now let's discuss some ways you can expand the trope beyond the limited capacity it can get stuck in and avoid heteronormativity. Number 1, decenter reproduction. This doesn't mean that no one ever has babies again. It simply means that the mechanics of true mates allow bonds to form between non-reproducing partners. These can be bonds between older or elderly characters, bonds involving infertile parties, or pairings that simply don't want and don't have children. In Wildfire Hellhound by Zoe Chant, the female protagonist was born with Turner syndrome, making her infertile from birth. This isn't an issue for the male protagonist, who wasn't interested in having kids of his own anyway. Yet, they're still true mates. 2. Use queer pairings or queer dynamics. This could be a same-sex pairing or a group dynamic. Written by Catherine Moon, has a world in which the ideal form of marriage in their supernatural community is a coven of 4 people of any gender. The universe of Tone of Voice by Kaya Sonderby has an alien race that uses a matchmaker for platonic matches so that even sex-repulsed members of the community can find an asexual companion. While neither of these stories are quite what I would consider true mates, they do offer an insight as to what queer versions of the bond could look like. 3. Shift the power dynamic. In a speculative human pairing, have the woman be the speculative partner and the man be the human. Or else have the male speculative partner be from a species that has weaknesses compared to humans. Shift the narrative from man big, strong, protect to something more nuanced. Let the woman be strong for once. How to avoid a grooming analogy. No one wants to be the next Jacob imprinted on a baby meme, so how can you use a true mate trope in a way that doesn't invite that kind of speculation? Number 1, character motivation. In Immortal Unchained by Lindsay Sands, the vampire protagonist recognizes a young girl in his restaurant as his true mate and purposefully avoids her to keep from doing something he shouldn't. It shows that he is aware that any connection with her at this point would be wrong. However, the mechanics still allow for a theoretical situation in which someone else has recognized a minor as their true mate and acted on it, so it's not the safest option. Number 2, build in mechanics. For a surefire way to avoid a grooming analogy, build mechanics into the world that make it impossible for any adult to find their true mate in a minor. For example, you could state that a true mate cannot be found until both parties have passed a specific rite of passage or have both reached a predefined age of maturity. In Bear's Chosen Mate by Vivian Orend, the polar bear shifters have a week-long mating fever that is the only time they can find their true mates. This mating fever only begins in adulthood and will only entice other adults that were already sexually interested in the shifter. Not only does this prevent a grooming analogy, it also comes with a fun, "it's you" realization as the shifter finds out that their true mate is someone they knew all along. In The Dragon Prince of Alaska by Elva Birch, true mate bonds were created for the shifter royal family from a centuries-old magical contract. The magic is only activated if the potential partner holds the ability to be a leader alongside their mate. Therefore, they are expected to be crowned and begin ruling shortly after the bond is solidified. This comes with the implicit caveat that the mate needs to be an adult. But a giant note to this one here. Do not use fertility status as a bonding mechanic for human characters. The biological ability to reproduce can start as young as 9 or 10 years old in most Homo sapiens. Not only will this not negate talk of grooming, you'd actually be reflecting real pedophile talking points. So, if you do want true mate mechanics with fertility as the trigger, even though it's heteronormative, I would suggest using only characters from speculative species whose biological capacity to reproduce begins in adulthood. And number 3, the simplest. Just don't bring it up. This is the most common method used by authors writing true mates. You simply write stories where adults are only falling in love with other adults and never bring up the idea that a true mate bond between adult and child is even possible. Never have a protagonist bond with a minor. Never have anyone discuss it happening anywhere else in your book's universe. This could leave the door open for bad faith critics to make unfair assumptions, but a good faith reader will usually fill in the gap and assume that pedophilia doesn't happen in this framework. However, if you're still worried, you can always go back in and add mechanics. Long story short, I love the true mate trope. Do I wish it was a little less heteronormative? Of course. But the idea of having a person or people that are it for you in one way or another is appealing to most. Whether it's a singular romantic partner, a polycule, or a platonic group, we like knowing that there are other people we fit with perfectly. And True Mates shows us a world in which everyone can and will find their people. And also, who hasn't thought about dating someone not human before? Obviously, I haven't read every book with this trope, so if there are other facets that I forgot or missed, please let me know. Do you consider Ice Planet Barbarians to be true mates? What species would you like your true mate or mates to be? Please let me know down in the comments. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.